Pleasure to be here with you today. Can we get the presentation going as well? There we go. So just like CK mentioned, so my name is Rami Avidan, and I am the CEO of Deutsche Telekom IoT. And today, what I will speak to you about is around orchestration, orchestrating the Internet of Things, because of course it is a landscape of a wide variety of different types of people. But before we get there, just a few touch points, right? I'm not going to dwell on COVID-19. I think all of you are aware of the current situation and what that has led to. Generally speaking, it's obviously been very painful for many businesses, but also individuals around the world. But I also see some positives out of the COVID situation. Obviously, this is driving the adoption of digitization. We're definitely seeing a massive impact across the board on businesses and the business leaders. The boardroom is now definitely looking at digitization not only as something that will improve their situation when other potential pandemics comes around the corner, but more important on how they can operate and run their businesses, I would say, in a much better way going forward, right? So we see that as a very positive effect. Then when it comes to specifically the industrial vertical or space around the world, what we're seeing here is that manufacturing, generally speaking, has been a front runner in IoT adoption. You know, when you look at a lot of the sort of analyst reports and whatnot, and you look at the different IoT projects that are out there, what we're seeing here is that, you know, basically around 20 to 25% of most of the IoT projects that are out there are in one way or another touching the manufacturing space, which is obviously very, very interesting, right? To see that this is now really gaining speed and momentum. That does not mean, by the way, that we don't have problems in this space, and I'll come to touch upon them just briefly. Then, of course, the areas that the manufacturing space has been historically very focused on has obviously been around monitoring of assets, but also very much about predictive maintenance, right? Being able to predict what will happen and being able to act upon that before it happens to obviously improve on the efficiency levels of that production line. But of course, there are also lots and lots of other areas that we're seeing, trends that we're seeing in this space, right? And you see them here. Just want to highlight a few of them, right? The first one is what we call industrial consumerization, where basically, you know, if you look at the general consumer, you know, when we go and buy a consumer product, basically the way that we're really wanting to engage with those capabilities is plug and play, right? We want to order it on some sort of online store. We want to get it delivered to us as quickly as possible. We want to unwrap it, you know, preferably in a very nice wrapping. We want to basically plug it in and we want it to work. We don't want to have to code. We don't want to have to try to put things together. We want it to work. And what we're seeing here in the industrial space is that our B2B clients are more and more going towards what we call them the industrial consumerization, where they want more plug and play, where they want to simplify, they want to reduce barriers, they want to have shortened time to market. So we're seeing that as a very, very general big trend. But what we're also seeing is the concept of smartification, right? And of course, this is something that has been going on for a long time, but now we're really seeing it taking off. And what we mean with smartification is the ability to take something that historically perhaps, I don't want to use the word dumb, but an asset that didn't necessarily convey its information. Now, of course, smartification basically means that you plug a communication asset onto that device, and all of a sudden you can actually start seeing information from this asset, making it instantly smarter, right? But you know, this is just like between people, right? The more you collaborate, the better the situation will become and the more value you will be able to create. So we're seeing a very, very large general trend around this topic. And then, of course, over the last 6 months, I'm sure you've been, to many different sessions talking about the sort of new normal and the new way of working, and people are talking about working more from home, not so much in the offices, and so on and so forth. And I think what we're seeing here is that this is very much true. But what we're also seeing here is that in the industrial space and in the manufacturing space within the industrial sector, what we're seeing here is a complexity. We're seeing a boardroom discussion about how do we allow our people working in factories to perhaps actually manage machines from afar? How do we make that come alive? How do we ensure that we are able to run our factories like that? And of course, for that to work, of course, technology is pivotal, not to mention security and whatnot. But we're seeing a big trend and a lot of questions from our customers on how we as Deutsche Telekom can help our customers to remotely manage their own processes, basically, right? So we're seeing huge interest in these three different areas. And what I wanted to do now is to take you through just quickly a couple of different use cases where we see customers deploying our capabilities. And what I want to showcase here is the simplicity of how you can actually adopt digital technologies. Because of course, one of the big things that we're seeing is that customers very typically are scared, right? They're scared that this is going to A, cost a lot of money, B, take a lot of time, and obviously C, be extremely complex, from a pure technology perspective. But actually, I want to just showcase to you how easy certain things can be. So if you take Krone, Krone is a manufacturing of components specifically to the beverage production industry, right? So they deliver components to the machineries that are going into producing beverage. Now, Krone had a challenge. And of course, one of the challenges they had was that they wanted to streamline the entire process of them building one of their components, creating one of their components, until it actually got delivered to the customer. They had a big problem of, they produced something and then it was sitting there and the customer wasn't aware that that it was produced and it was ready to be picked up and delivered. So what we delivered together with Krone here was that when Krone has finished the production of one of those components, we have developed a small service button. And I actually didn't bring one with me, but it's not bigger than this. And it has a button on it. And when that asset is ready to be picked up, somebody at Krone's delivery center presses this button. It goes to the logistics chain who knows that it's now ready to be picked up and to which customer it needs to be delivered, right? And of course, you can imagine here that the implementation of technology here is simply a small device with a long battery life using NB-IoT capabilities. That means that it will sit out there for several years without having to be touched. And you're actually not integrating yourself into any other technologies here. But this is IoT at its purest, right? You're simplifying, you're optimizing, and it's a really quick plug and play, very much around the consumerization type of trend that we were talking about before. So this is just to showcase that deploying IoT doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be time consuming, right? And it definitely doesn't have to be over costly, right? Depends on what you want to do. And I'll come and talk about strategy in a couple of minutes, because I think that is the biggest obstacles for most of these companies. So just bear with me 1 second here. The second company I want to just highlight and what they've done here is Petco. Petco is a company that delivers basically a service of maintenance of air compressors to a wide variety of different customers around the world, right? And what their problem was, of course, was that if they looked at the landscape of their customers' air compressors, basically the customers had what we call a hybrid environment. So it wasn't only one OEM that delivered the air compressors. And of course, for Petco, what they wanted to do was to digitize the way that they were able to monitor the entire air compressors landscape at the customer's premises. And so what they wanted was some sort of IoT platform that were able to integrate a wide variety of different air compressors OEMs capabilities and data streams into one infrastructure, which is what we ended up building together with Petco using our Cloud of Things IoT platform that basically streamlines the very hybrid environment of the customer landscape, giving now Petco the insights of a wide variety of different machines within the customer landscape, allowing then Petco to deliver a much better service to their customers. The time to market here was a little bit longer, of course, in the Krone case, because here you're talking about mounting connectivity devices and assets on compressors, streaming then the data from the wide variety of different air compressors into this sort of more agnostic IoT portal. But of course, that increases the ability for, in this case, Petco to deliver that managed service, if you may, that maintenance capability to that customer landscape. Also a very, very interesting use case, I would argue. And the final customer I would like to highlight is a smaller business called Glasgow. And most of you probably haven't heard of Glasgow, but basically these guys are one of the world leaders in glass painting. And by the way, I wasn't aware of this before of course, I came across Glasgow. But you know, when you do paint on glass, it is paramount that the temperature is absolutely accurate. And of course, when you paint on glass, you do that in very specific ovens, kiln ovens. And what we delivered here with Glasgow was, of course, a very simple solution of delivering sensors within the kiln oven to ensure that it was the absolute right temperature, because it was very difficult to monitor previously. And of course, connecting that then to an application, allowing the Glasgow sort of, let's call it the oven sort of controller or maintenance machinery person, to have real insights into the quality of the glass that was coming out, because of course that's what their core sort of product, right? That the actual paint on the glass lasts and that has the right quality and whatnot, right? So in this case, it's the temperature that was the key element. And so with a very simple solution, what we did here, we mounted a sensor that gave then Glasgow the ability to, in real time, have real clarity on the temperature here. So again, simple use cases, not very complex, not very time consuming, and of course, not that costly either, right? Which I think is very important to convey to the audience here. I'm trying to press on the next slide here, gents. Could we go to the next slide, please? While the team here gets this going, look, I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest problems for, I would say, most of the IoT customers out there, right? It is about strategy. And this is not specific only to the industrial or manufacturing sector. This, I would say, is a general problem. Look, Bitkom did a analysis, and what they came up with was that only around 20% of companies that they asked, and they asked thousands of companies, had actually a digital strategy. Now, out of those 20%, only 10% of those customers had integrated that digital strategy with the general corporate strategy. And the message here is the following. Look, when you look at IoT, and when you look at what it is that you want to do, it is not a technology discussion. It is a strategy discussion. And it's not a digital strategy discussion. It's a corporate strategy discussion. Because of course, if you now decide to deploy, thank you very much. If you now decide to deploy technologies in your business, you have to know why. And so the biggest obstacles for most of these customers is that they actually don't know strategically what they want to do. And even if they do, they haven't outlined a clear strategy. And even if they have outlined a very clear digital strategy, it is typically decoupled from your corporate strategy. Now, that doesn't make sense, right? The digital strategy has to be completely incorporated into your overarching company strategy for the digital strategy to actually create the value that you're anticipating. So the biggest takeaway here is to, number one, don't start looking at technologies. Start looking at the value that you're looking to create when deploying digital capabilities within your organization. And then my biggest advice, and I should tell you, maybe I should have said that in the very beginning. You know, I've been in IoT now for a little bit more than 20 years. And I would say the big red line is that the companies that are very successful in deploying digital technologies are the companies that don't start talking about technologies. They start talking about the value that they want to obtain and the road to value. And that is the strategy and the tactics. The last thing that they then look at is, how do I then actually deploy it from a technical perspective? And so the way to really get this going, because of course, what happens here is that when you start thinking about connecting up assets and start streaming out data and mining that data, what happens very quickly is that you start looking at time to market, you start looking at the investments required, and very quickly your leadership and especially your finance community are going to start asking a lot of questions. So the way I typically advise clients is, look, you need to think big. You need to paint a picture of the value of digitization. Then you need to start small. And you need to start small, showing real proof points. And it doesn't have to be enormous proof points. Small proof points that the digitization that you're deploying in your organization is creating insights. It's creating insights that allows you to take better decisions, that allows you to now start creating smaller pockets of value. And when you've went on that journey, you can then, of course, scale fast, right? So that would be my absolute biggest advice to the people listening here today. Now, of course, CK, as you mentioned, right, one of the big things that I do want to touch upon is sort of the IoT landscape. And if you look at some of the barriers the customers face here, you know, first of all, it is a complex IoT landscape where there are a myriad of different players offering platforms and technologies and capabilities and competences. And they're all probably very good. But of course, if you're now a customer, who do I engage with? What technology do I pick? It's a very, very complex landscape. And the complexity and the myriad of players in there, with very little level of standardization, very little level of interoperability, the differentiation between the different use cases, these barriers become sometimes too high to overcome for a lot of these customers, right? And so the way we as Deutsche Telekom wants to help customers overcome that is by really helping them orchestrating the landscape. And what we mean with orchestrating the landscape is helping and guiding our customers and partners in being able to create ecosystems of different capabilities. May that be technology, may that be competence and experience that they can draw upon. And the whole concept of the orchestration that we want to do is that we want to create a multiplier effect for our customers. Because today, what we're suggesting to our customers is that, look, you shouldn't look for vendors. You should look for partners that have the right business models, partners that want to engage with you and create value together with you in the space that you're looking to create value. And of course, that will allow you to create your ecosystem. But of course, what you're now expecting from the partners that you select, the partners that you want to work closely with, is you want them to have their ecosystem. Because of course, that is how you create a multiplier on the ecosystem of ecosystems, which will allow you to tap into more capabilities, may that be technology or may that be competence that you otherwise wouldn't have had access into. So this is about making yourselves smarter. This is about shortening time to market and learning from others, learning from mistakes and learning from successes that others have had. And my biggest recommendation here is not to try to start to build an enormous ecosystem. Start very small. Find 1, 2, maybe 3 key partners to you that you can start this journey on. Engage with them, learn from them, have them help you extend your partnership structure, your ecosystem when you're ready to do so, using their capabilities and their ecosystem. So that would definitely be my recommendation. And the final word of advice on this specific point is, look, there isn't a single player under the sun. Nobody that in their own right, with their own capabilities, can deliver an end-to-end solution in IoT. Why? Because there's so many different components, capabilities, and experiences required in an end-to-end chain. So you do need to work with partners. You have no choice. And then it's so very important to select those partners and select them very, very carefully. Okay. And how do we then do that? So some of you have probably heard of that. We've sort of at late started talking about what we call the DT IoT hub. And what our IoT hub is really about is 2 things. One aspect is of course around us allowing our ecosystem to streamline their capabilities on top of our infrastructure. And the reason why we do that is, of course, we want to simplify and reduce barriers for our customers. So this is about interoperability, right? So the whole idea here is that we will ensure interoperability of a wide variety of different capabilities and systems. So this is not a new platform. This is an infrastructure that orchestrates a wide variety of different platforms and capabilities. May they be Deutsche Telekom capabilities or may they be third-party capabilities. Now, the final piece of the IoT hub that is very important for customers is that the whole beauty of the hub is that we are able to integrate what we call legacy capabilities that you may or may not have within your businesses, but also the new aspects of use cases that you want to deploy. Because this is one of the big pain points for customers, right? That you have all of these different silos. The IoT hub is there to streamline these silos on your behalf. So that is the concept of the IoT hub. So just recapping real quickly, right? I mean, we talked about different trends, right? We talked about the consumerization, we talked about smartification, we talked about new work and where IoT capabilities can help along all of those 3 different trends that we're seeing, on top of course, predictive maintenance and monitoring condition and so on. The most important thing is your strategy. Making sure that you have a digital strategy that is incorporated, of course, into your overarching corporate strategy. And finally, of course, ecosystems are the way of the future. Do not think about doing this alone. Think about doing this together with a wide variety of partners. Partners that don't only deliver technologies, partners that deliver new relationships to you through their relationships that they may have, companies that also deliver competence and are real partners to you, not vendors. Now, of course, we as DT IoT are obviously extremely interested in being your partner. So first of all, we do have a digital expo as part of this show today. So you can, of course, take a route and understand a little bit more granularly what we do there. But also what we would like to extend to you today is obviously a workshop that is tailored to your needs, where we will bring in our experts that are specifically focused on your specific requirements and needs, where we are able to, together with you, maybe give you some, and I think in German we call it impulses, where we are able to give you insights that you may not have seen before. And so with that, I hand over to you, CK, and thank you all for listening, and I'm ready to take some questions.
Thanks, Rami. Wonderful presentation. And I must say that whatever you spoke is pretty much what we believe in, we advocate, and that's what the company name, I Run All Things Connected. And when somebody asks me what the role we play in this whole IoT ecosystem, we are the orchestrator. So this is pretty much all the point which you mentioned is really which I think the organization must do. As you also said rightly, that no matter how big we become or how small we are, everybody has a play in this whole IoT ecosystem. A typical IoT solution, as we know, require at the broad level 7 layers of technology, from devices to gateway to connectivity infrastructure, application, security, and all those sort of things. So as you rightly said, if we focus on the use case, we need to find the right partners who will work together for us to realize those solutions. So my first quick question is, from the ecosystem perspective, right? So, and many companies are trying to get into that. Should they build their own ecosystem, or they should tap upon something existing? So what would be your approach for the organizations to go about initiating the ecosystem, as you are trying to share some of the insight?
Sure. Well, look, Siki, I think as I mentioned, I think the way I would approach this, right? I would deploy the notion of think big, start small, and then scale fast. And what I mean with that is, of course, as a starting point, you need to have a target picture of where you want to land, why you want to land that within your ecosystem, right? But then, of course, you don't start by, contacting, 200-300 companies that you try to build an ecosystem with. What you start doing is you start listing what are the key capabilities, may that be technology or may that be competence, that I need in my ecosystem. And then basically you crystallize to yourself what are those most important capabilities. And then you meet two or three companies within those different segments that you find interesting. And then you pick maybe 1, 2, or 3 companies that you want to start engaging with. And to me, the way I would do this, and actually, funnily enough, I've done it a few times now. And the way you do that is that you are very upfront with your request to these players, right? You're saying, look, we're not looking for vendors. We're looking for partners that can be part of our ecosystem, but also partners that are building their own ecosystem, right? Because of course, what you want to get the multiplier effect, right? You want to have a few partners that you integrate very closely with to drive value in your business. And you expect them to, on their end, create more relationships that they can bring into the relationship that you have with them to over time enlarge your plethora of capabilities and partners, right? So you start small. You make sure that you have a solid engagement, because having partners just on a slide or on a website doesn't create value for you. You want partners that engages with you, that has workshop, that brings capabilities, gives you insights, maybe brings technologies, and together with you create the value, right? And over time, of course, as you get that methodology right and you understand how you as a business can act in an ecosystem and how you need that ecosystem to act for you, you can of course scale it. So that would be my approach for anybody that wanted to go down that route.
Well, again, completely echoed your message. And what we call in this region, which we are running the largest IoT ecosystem, we call it a open adaptive ecosystem. So as you said, it's open. So organizations can leverage our ecosystem, extended ecosystem, try to solve the problem. And also you mentioned about, it's not just about kind of talking to 1,000 companies. It's not about collecting logos and posting on website and the LinkedIn. It's pretty much focusing on what really problem we are trying to solve and who is the right partners for us to drive this together. And actually they could bring additional capabilities and the gaps which maybe we may be having. So I agree with you. Again, in the interest of time, one quick question. As you mentioned that IoT Hub is initiative within Deutsche Telekom. How do we kind of get onto this hub? Is there some sort of requirement? There's some qualification criteria, and any quick pointers, or just drop an email?
So of course there are, if you may, if I simplify it, there is a southbound and northbound, right? Southbound, of course, very much around the ecosystem players, the players that are delivering technologies in the sphere of IoT, right? And of course, here we're now building out the sort of integration, interoperability between the IoT hub and a wide variety of different capabilities. And if you feel that you have a capability that you think could fit well into the IoT hub, you should reach out to us. And of course, we'll have that dialogue with you. We'll understand our customers' requirements and needs, and we'll look at how we can take that capability that you may or may not have and extend that to our customers, but also how the IoT hub potentially can make sense for you and your customers, right? But if you're then a manufacturer, I would venture to say the way that you would do that is obviously have a workshop with us, right, where we can look at the different capabilities that the IoT hub has, and if that makes sense to you to engage with, right? But let me be very crisp and clear of where we are with IoT hub. This was a notion that sort of started coming to us basically a year ago, right? And we've just launched the first version, which is the first sort of, let's call it, mature MVP that we're doing now friendly testing with long-term customers and partners of ours to understand, you know, what are the modifications that we need to do? How is the stability in real-life deployments? What does the next sort of, because this is a very agile-driven approach, albeit DT being a very large animal, right? We have deployed agility here as well. So we're now amassing the next sort of 4 to 6 quarters roadmap. So I would very much encourage you to reach out to us, have a dialogue, give us insights, give us feedback on what would be important to you, so that we can weave that into our next steps of the IoT hub. I hope that makes sense, EK.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm certainly going to get in touch with you, because the kind of work which you're already doing in Singapore and Southeast Asia, building a very strong ecosystem partnership, and let's get in touch offline. And there are a couple of questions which I would request in the interest of time, if you could please look into the chat window as well as the question tab, and can answer that later maybe. Yeah. So with that, I would like to thank you, Rami, again for very practical and very relevant insight about the ecosystem approach into manufacturing. And I look forward to speaking with you. And for the participants, any questions, there's an email already which Rami has shared. Please reach out to him, and I'm sure he'll be, and the team will be happy to answer. Thank you, Rami.
CK, thank you so much for having me. Enjoy the rest of the day. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.